Fill this land with the Father's glory blaze. Spirit blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light. Jesus, light of your love is shining in midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us, set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me, shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the Father's glory blaze. Spirit blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light. As we gaze on your heavenly brightness, so our faces display your likeness, ever changing from glory to glory. Here, may our lives tell your story. Shine on me, shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the Father's glory blaze. Spirit blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light.
The Holy Gospel, according to Matthew, the 4th chapter. Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus answered, "It is written, 'One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God.'" Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, 'He will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone.'" Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, 'Do not put the Lord your God to the test.'" Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, "All these I will give you, if you will fall down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, 'Worship the Lord your God and serve only him.'" Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him.
Over the last several years, I've begun to see and understand Lent, temptation, and the struggles in my life in a different way. It used to be that I thought about those things in terms of self-denial. Just say no, don't do this, don't do that, and everything will be fine. But then life got complicated. Just saying no and self-denial were no longer enough. I don't mean that I exchanged self-denial for self-indulgence. No, not at all. What I'm saying is that our lives deserve and demand more than just saying no. And here's why I say that. I suspect we've all had times and experiences in our lives when just saying no just didn't apply. It just wasn't relevant because the issue wasn't a yes or no question. There were times when I did the right thing. I said no. I was who I was supposed to be. I did what I was supposed to do. I followed the rules. But despite all that, it didn't work out the way I wanted or thought it would. There was no sense of integrity or wholeness. I was compliant, but I was not changed or transformed. Other times I latched onto particular values and virtues as the things that would guide my life. But then I went out and did the exact opposite of what I claimed to be important to me. Have you ever done that? There was a disconnect between what was going on inside of me and what was going on outside of me. It wasn't enough to just say no. I wanted more. I needed congruity between my inner life and the outer world. So I started thinking about Lent and those places of struggle that we often call temptations, not so much in terms of self-denial, but more so in terms of self-knowledge. I think maybe these situations can provide us with some important information about ourselves. I think that when we reflect on today's Old Testament reading, Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit, and today's gospel with Jesus being tempted in the wilderness, we tend to hold them in opposition to each other. On the one hand, Adam and Eve got it all wrong, and on the other hand, Jesus got it all right. On the one hand, Adam and Eve were bad, and on the other hand, Jesus was good. I don't necessarily think that that's a wrong observation. It just seems like a superficial and overly literal understanding of those texts. I'm not suggesting that Jesus got it wrong and Adam and Eve got it right. Oh no, not at all. I just think there's a deeper meaning. And I want us to find that deep thread that runs through and connects those two stories. And I believe that deep connecting thread is self-knowledge. When we move beyond the dualities of good and bad, right and wrong, we discover that both stories are about self-knowledge. Think about Adam and Eve. Do you remember what happened just after they ate the forbidden fruit? Their eyes were opened. So what does that mean about their eyes before they ate the apple? Were they closed? They were seeing with closed eyes, partial vision, some sort of blindness. There's something about eating the fruit that opened the eyes of Adam and Eve, that gave them a new awareness, that awakened them and brought them to a new level of consciousness. So maybe they didn't fall into sin as much as they fell into consciousness. They experienced something of themselves and the world in the same way that God does. They knew good and evil. They saw it all. Life and their world just got a whole lot more complicated and potentially more real. Think about the times in your life when that's happened to you. There's been a new awareness, a new awakening, a new consciousness, and you see the world and yourself in a brand new way. More often than not, that seems to follow some sort of stumbling or falling, a failure, a turning away from God, one another, and even ourselves. With that new consciousness, we might see pain and disfigurement, but we also see beauty and goodness. We see places of brokenness and disintegration, but we also see wholeness and integrity. And I don't mean just in the world around us, we see it within ourselves as well. We see the truth and reality of our lives. We see and understand ourselves as a mixture of both. We see our own contradictions. We are neither wholly good or wholly bad. We are both. That's why life gets complicated. That's why it's not enough to just say no. If we look beyond their failure to say no, we could see that the garden experience brought Adam and Eve to self-knowledge. By the same token, if we look beyond Jesus saying no, we can see his wilderness experience as having brought him to self-knowledge. Immediately before Jesus goes into the wilderness, he is baptized. While Jesus is standing in the water of the Jordan, a voice from heaven says, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." It is then that Jesus is led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted. He goes to the wilderness having been told that he is God's son. He goes to the wilderness having heard that he is God's beloved. And he goes into the wilderness knowing that his Father is pleased with him. And even though all of that was a given before Jesus ever faced the first temptation, it was publicly affirmed. So whether Jesus said yes or no to the temptations would not be determined if he is God's son, if he is beloved by God, or if God is pleased with him. Those are not the consequences or rewards for passing the wilderness temptations, but the preconditions of those temptations. Grace always precedes us. So maybe Jesus' time in the wilderness wasn't so much about proving or giving something to God as much as it was about Jesus learning and experiencing something about himself, that he really is God's son, that he really is God's beloved, and that God really is pleased with him. Maybe that was something Jesus needed to learn about himself so that he could come out of the wilderness knowing who he was, knowing to whom he belonged, and knowing what his message to the world would be. The self-knowledge Jesus gained in the wilderness formed and shaped his public ministry of healing, teaching, and preaching. The wilderness was a place of knowledge for Jesus. Might it be for us as well? The garden and their failure to say no was a place of self-knowledge for Adam and Eve. Maybe it could be for us too. So what if we take these next 40 days of Lent and let go of the questions about good and bad, right or wrong, and whether we are enough, and instead we sought self-knowledge? Not in a narrow, selfish, and egotistical way, but a self-knowledge that is deep and profound, that reveals our truest and most authentic self, that makes us face and examine ourselves, not to make judgments or inflict punishment, but to seek healing and new life. The self-knowledge that turns our gaze back to God. If we choose the path of self-knowledge, we'll need to be watchful and ask difficult questions. What are the painful and wounded places in us that cause us to act out in ways that are not good for us or people around us? What are the buttons in us that get so easily pushed that cause us to react with words and actions that we really don't want to say or do? What are the ways in which we have contributed to the pain of the world, and how might we now begin contributing to its healing? What are the patterns and habits that direct and control our lives? Do we truly believe that we are God's beloved sons and daughters? If so, how do we live that? If not, why not? In what ways are we living an authentic life, and in what ways are we not? This self-knowledge will take us much further than will self-denial. That doesn't mean self-denial is not important or that it does not have a positive and necessary role in our lives in the Lenten season. I just want to give self-knowledge a higher priority and put self-denial in service to self-knowledge. I think about a past Lent when I gave up meat and wine. For 40 days, I denied myself meat and wine. And you know what I did on Easter? I had a nice steak and a glass of wine. What did that do for me? How did that grow me and change the way I see and engage the world? What did that do for my relationships? Did it make me more real, more loving, more authentic? It may have been a successful Lent, but I am not sure it was a holy Lent. I am not sure it really changed me or brought me to a new life. What I did learn about myself is that I proved that I can give up meat and wine for 40 days. Well, that's not necessarily a bad or wrong thing. I think there is more to Lent, more to you and me, and more to our lives. I think God wants more for us and offers more. I have a spiritual director who I meet with every few weeks. Sometimes I ask her for advice when I'm not sure what to do or how to handle a pastor issue. Without fail, she will ask me the same two questions. What are you learning about yourself, and what do you need from me? What if we let those two questions companion us through Lent? What if we went through this season of Lent hearing God asking us, what are you learning about yourself, and what do you need from me? That might be the start of a holy Lent. It would be Lent in which our eyes are open to the truth about ourselves, who we are, what we do. It would be a Lent in which, despite things done and left undone, we would rediscover and maybe hear for the first time that we too are God's beloved children with whom he is well pleased. Maybe it would be a Lent in which we could let go of judgment and keeping score. Maybe it would be a Lent that would lead us to new life, a fuller life, a life in which we discover that we are God's glory. Let's be God's glory, today, tomorrow, and the day after, now and forever. Amen.